Make sure we got everything good to go. Oh, no, it counts the other way. It just tells me how long I've been talking, so I know how hungry we are. All right, now it's going. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm glad that we're here today. We're going to witness another miracle today. I intend to preach an entire sermon without referencing football. So it'll be difficult. No. If you will open your Bibles, assuming you still bring them to church, or open your electronic device, your Bible app, that counts. That's what I'm doing. To Deuteronomy. That's in the first half. It's in the Old Testament. Chapter 34, verse 9. While you're turning there, what I will share with you is that you all hear me talk about football, but what you don't hear me talk about a lot is my days as a track participant. I was not a track star. Most people look at me and go, oh, yeah, you do track. We didn't know you did football. Yeah, no. I was much better at football than I was at track. I wasn't very fast. But I tell you, because I don't have good jokes, I'll just tell you a funny story. It's true. One of my events in high school was the pole vault, which for those of you who don't know what that event is, it's where you take this big long pole that bends and you run down the runway, you stick it in the box, and you try and shoot yourself up over a bar. It's kind of like a high jump on steroids. And I was a pole vaulter for about 2 weeks. You see, as a pole vaulter, what you always do when you get your pole out, you take about 6 steps back from the box. And you just take those 6 steps and you practice rolling the pole into the box and bending it. You step back, roll it in, bend it. Well, I was a pole vaulter until I broke the pole. So I'm down there warming up and I go, and the pole snapped just below my hand. And I'm left with about 2 foot of pole in my hand. And then the other, 8 foot of pole hit me in the forehead, knocked me to the ground. And I got up and I told our track coach, I said, I ain't doing this no more. And he said, oh, you can't quit. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure I can quit. I said, I'll go run, I'll throw discus, and I'll jump, but I ain't pole vaulting no more. Anybody here who's been to Rock Hill High, you know Y.C. Winborn, the late Y.C. Winborn, Coach Winborn. He's a very interesting man, and so I tell you that because I'm going to try and imitate his voice as he spoke back to me. He said, if you got knocked off of a horse, you got to get back on. I said, if the horse kicked me in the head, I'd shoot it. And no, I wouldn't get back on it. It's that simple, you know. So I won't have any pole vaulting references today because it's a painful memory for me, but that's my funny story. So Deuteronomy, chapter 34, verse 9. I wish I had jokes. I just got funny stories. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. What we see here is the moment at the end of Moses' ministry, and as he's passing the baton, passing the torch on to Joshua. I'd like to show you just a 1.5-minute video clip from the 2008 Beijing Olympics. If you will, take a look. An article from August 21st in the USA Today, the headline reads, Baton drops mar U.S. efforts in both the 4x100 relays. Both U.S. relays dropped the baton on the exchange to the anchor, Darvis Patton to Tyson Gay, and in the women's event, Tori Edwards to Lauren Williams. By the time I went to grab it, there was nothing, he said. It was probably my fault, said Gay, the 2007 world champion in the 100 and 200 meters, who failed to advance beyond the 100 semifinals in his first meet since the July 5th hamstring injury in the U.S. trials. Some people say that when it hits the hand, you should have it. I'm a veteran. I've run all kinds of relays. I've never dropped a baton in my life. It's kind of upsetting. I can't believe it. For the first time since the women's 4x100 was introduced in 1928, not including the boycotted 1980 games, the USA won't medal in either relay. Today we're going to talk about the relay. I've entitled this message, The Exchange Zone. God began messing with my heart on this topic when Sean preached a couple of months ago for Pastor. And he was preaching about thresholds. And in the middle of that message, he referenced the exchange zone as he was explaining thresholds at the front end and the back end. And God began to stir my heart about how that relates to a lot of things, but in particular to our church. Today I'm going to do a difficult thing. I'm going to talk about our church. I'm not going to talk about the church. I'm not going to talk about the faith. I'm going to talk about us. I'm going to talk about our church. I want you to know and I want you to understand that I'm probably going to make a point today. I'm still fighting with the Lord about it. That I walked away from 3 times last night. And finally I had to give in to the Lord, and I think He's got something to say. I don't know what made your decision to be here today, but I kind of got the feeling somebody decided last night that they were going to be here today. And I think that that particular word's for you. So please give me your attention. I'll do my best to be efficient to get through this. But today we're going to talk about the exchange zone. What you saw in that video clip was the horror of any track and field relay participant. You never, ever want to drop the baton. In track, it is the sin of all sins. It is the signifying of the end of the race for you. What I have with me today is a baton. This little thing is the win or the loss. It's funny, you had the fastest men in the world. The guys that you saw were some of the fastest men in all of our nation. And they were crippled, had no chance of medaling once this little thing hit the track. What I want to say to you today is that good relay exchanges happen in practice. They don't happen on race day. As I was reading about this particular failure, I saw that somebody posed the question, why? Why would the fastest men in the world, some of the most talented track and field athletes in the world, how could they botch something? How could they drop the baton? It seems like a simple thing. They have so much ability. They have so much talent. Why do they drop it? It's because what oftentimes happens is you have extremely talented individuals who are selected based on speed alone, and they don't get time to practice their exchange. They don't have the opportunity. They don't have months and weeks of day in, day out learning about their teammate, learning about the guy who's going to receive the baton, learning how to do it. It's just expected that if you're fast, you ought to be able to figure out a baton exchange. So yeah, these guys practice it, but you have fewer baton drops in high school and college because those guys run together for years, as opposed to for weeks. So let's ask the question, how do the good teams do it? How do the good teams have such strong exchanges? Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to need a volunteer here in a minute, so go to the bathroom if you don't want to participate. I'm going to pick somebody young. So, the way the good teams do it, right? So first, you select your team. And the team is oftentimes selected by the different characteristics that are needed for the different sections of the race. When I ran track, I ran a particular race that was called the Sprint Medley. And it was a 100 meter, 100 meter, 200 meter, and 400 meter race. So I ran the anchor leg, the 400-meter leg, which is one lap around the track, just to give you a reference. A 100-meter is a curve or a straightaway, and a 200-meter is a curve and a straightaway on a standard track. I ran the anchor leg, so I have a little bit of relay experience. The way the good teams do it is they get together and they say, all right, well, this is our team. Who's the best at starting? Who's the best at running the curves? Who's the best at finishing strong? And a good relay team will pick their order, not because I want to run first or I want to run last or I want to run in the middle. You pick the order of your participation based on the abilities and the skill sets of the members of the team. So where you're going to run in the relay team is dictated by what you're good at, what your strengths are. Then the next thing they do is they begin to practice that exchange when they begin to practice their exchange is they set a mark. So on a track, I tried hard to get a good picture of this, but I just couldn't find one that wasn't like auto-generated or it was animated. If you ever get to see a track, you'll see these big arrows on the track, usually in the corners. What those big arrows dictate are an exchange zone. So the arrows will usually at the front of the exchange zone will point into the exchange zone, and the arrows on the end of the exchange zone point back so that you know between those two arrow tips, that's the only real estate you have to get this out of your hand and into somebody else's. So in order to make sure that you execute that exchange in the right place at the right time, the guy in the exchange zone who's going to be waiting on that baton will watch his teammate run. He'll watch his teammate. He might even stand over to the side of the track, not even on the track, and he'll watch his teammate run. He'll watch him run into that exchange zone. He'll watch him run through it. What he's looking for is he needs to learn his speed. He needs to learn his rhythm. He needs to learn what they call his gait. How do his legs move? What he's doing when he's learning that is he's trying to figure out where to set that mark. Because what that mark signifies is somewhere outside the exchange zone, there's going to be a mark on the track, and when my teammate gets to that mark, it's over. I'm done, and I'm running. He will catch me. But you can only learn that if you study. You have to study your teammate. You have to watch them. You have to spend time with them. You have to learn how they do what they do. And so the guy in the exchange zone, his number one priority is to find that mark on the track. Because what he'll do is once he figures out what that mark is, every track he goes to, when he gets on the track, he'll know exactly how many feet from that arrow in the exchange zone it is to that mark. And he'll mark it off. He'll take a little piece of tape and he'll put it down right beside the line. Because he knows that as long as he takes off running, when that guy gets that mark, everything's going to be smooth. The next thing they do is they begin to practice the exchange. So once you know your mark, you know that place where you're going to take off, you begin the hard task of getting this from one man running full speed to another man running full speed. Now what I want to do, I'll make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself because I feel like I am. Will, you're fun. Leave the drink there. You ever run track? No? Okay. Well, we'll probably do it. Let's do it up here. We got better lighting up here. We look better up here. All right, Will. You're going to be the guy getting the baton. Okay? Okay? All right. You're good there. Now, what I want you to do, you do your hands like this? Like that? Okay. Now, this is the secret. When this hand, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
You're right-handed. Okay, I want to do this the hard way. I'm left-handed. God doesn't love you as much as He loves me. My wife says I'm handicapped, but she loves me. When this hand goes back, it needs to look like that. Can you do that? I can't see behind you. You're going to tell me if you're doing it. You doing it? Okay. All right. So You don't do that until I tell you something. I ain't told you that part. All right. I'm going to say reach. Okay. When I say reach, then you do your hand like that, okay? Right. Will's awesome. I could have picked some of you other people, but y'all wouldn't have laughed as much as he does. Y'all got mad at me. All right, Will, run. And I'm going to go reach. And I'm going to put that in his hand. You got it? Don't drop it. We watched a video about that. I'm going to let go of it. Okay? You got it? All right. And then that's what a successful exchange is. Thank you, Will. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to touch that thing again, I don't think. Maybe I will. Who knows? So we practice the exchange. And now, world-class track athletes don't do it like that, because they already know the reach concept. But Will's never run track, The goal here is to make your exchange so smooth that it just blends in. It just blends in to the guy's natural running style. The last thing you want to do is to have a guy turn sideways to receive a baton. You don't want him handicapped in any way. You want him, from the time he sees you hit that mark, you want him running full speed, and it's going to be your burden to slide that baton into his hand. What I think is really noteworthy about the exchange, I'm kind of giving you the mechanics, giving you a quick overview of it. What Will and I did on a relay team, we would do that entire practices. We would spend hours a day preparing for that 5-second moment. We would spend every practice running to that exchange zone, sliding that baton into his hand, and letting him take off. Because we're already fast people. What we need to practice is how to move that little piece of metal, that little piece of aluminum, from one person to the next. Doug, I don't know what time it is, but I'm hungry. All right. So I read you a passage about Moses handing off to Joshua. And I want you to understand that Moses handing off to Joshua isn't the only example we have. We can look at when David handed off to Solomon. We see that when David handed off to Solomon, that prior to that moment, David had acquired almost all of the provisions necessary to build the temple. In that moment of transition, David openly proclaimed, he made a statement to the nation and successfully moved power from himself to his son. He had invested years in his son, teaching him how to lead, how to love the Lord, how to follow, how to take this nation to the right place. When we look at Joshua, he had understudied Moses for 40 years. Remember, Joshua was one of the first 12 that went in to spy the land before the verdict came back. We can look at what Paul and Timothy did when Paul took Timothy under his wing. We see that in Acts, and then in 2 Timothy we see Paul passing the torch on to Timothy. We see what Jesus did with his disciples. 12 men he invested in for a year and a half, day and night. And they turned the world upside down. When I began to think about the exchange zones of life, it seems to me that we in our church need to be aware that there are exchange zones on the racetracks that we're running. Remember that on a track, there are up to 7 lanes, 8 lanes, up to 8 lanes on a track. A track team doesn't run 1 meet a year and then leave. In the Olympics, you don't run one race and you're done. You run multiple races as an athlete. You have multiple responsibilities as an athlete. A guy who starts out in the exchange zone as a recipient, in the next exchange zone may very well be a deliverer. I asked the question in our church, are we paying attention to the exchange zones around us that we are rapidly approaching, and maybe ones that we've already come through? So as I began to take this elementary example of passing the baton into an implication phase, I really want you to buckle your seatbelts and ride with me. I'm hoping and I've been praying that this message will rattle some of our cages. I should also confess to you that as I began to prepare this, God reminded me that He's talking to me too. So this isn't some concept that I've got that I'm lobbing at you. This is something that God is tearing my heart to pieces over as well. So the implication of this torch passing moment, I think that we can boil down a baton. What is a baton in the church? I think we can boil that down to any type of ministry. A lot of times in the church we think of passing the torch or passing the baton as a leadership-only function. So we think of a pastor passing on to another pastor, a youth pastor passing on to another youth pastor, a women's ministry leader passing on to a women's ministry leader, or a ranger commander passing on to another ranger commander. We don't think about a nursing home visitor passing on the baton to another nursing home visitor. We don't think about a greeting card minister passing on the baton of greeting card ministry. We don't think of a toddler class worker passing on the baton to another toddler class worker. We don't think about that because, batons represent leadership. Those are the guys that made the team. They should run. I'm here to tell you today, I think that every one of us have an opportunity to either carry a baton or deliver a baton. Okay? I see that there are probably 4 types of people here today. And I want to know which one you're in. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. It's a rhetorical question, but I really would like to know if you ever want to come tell me. Just now is not the time or the place, First off, there are those among us who are actively carrying a baton. They have a baton in their hand and they're running, and they're running, and they're running. And my question to you is, have you identified who's in the exchange zone waiting on your baton? Have you looked ahead to the exchange zone to say, there's going to be somebody there to receive this when I get there? Are you learning about that guy running ahead of you? You see, one thing I didn't talk about with the exchange is the guy in the exchange zone has to learn how the guy runs to him. But the guy running into the exchange zone has to learn about how the other guy is running away from him. He has to study his arm movements because it's going to be his responsibility to yell the word reach. It's going to be his responsibility to initiate that exchange. And he's got to do it at the time when it fits that guy's motion the best. He's got to understand where we are in the zone. I got to understand how fast this guy's running. I have to understand his path of acceleration. I have to understand how his arm moves. So the guy running into the exchange zone likewise has a responsibility to know and to study the guy he will be passing the baton to. So if you're actively carrying a baton of ministry, I ask you, are you seriously looking at that guy that you're going to pass it on to? Are you looking at the person who is going to receive that work that you're carrying in the name of the gospel? Are you looking for that person? And are you investing in them? Are you studying them? Are you helping them? Are you building a relationship with them? Or are you just content to be running in the curve, to be wide open, free as the wind, carrying the baton, enjoying the crowd cheering for you? As the crowd cheered for the American team as they closed the gap and took the lead, the crowd sighed when they dropped the baton. I see there's another group here today who are neither carrying nor looking. They're what we call spectators. They're sitting in the stands. And maybe they're so excited about the race and they're sitting in there going, I sure wish that I could get in that leg of that relay race. I wish that I could carry the baton. I'm here to tell you today that you can. Come to practice. It's literally that simple. God has a plan for every kid that He created. God has a perfect plan for your life, and He wants you to run a leg of the race. See, we can run and run and run. This race has got a lot of miles left to run. He wants fresh legs in the race. He wants people to be able to pass the baton too. But you can't sit in the stands and somebody on the track go, hey, catch. It doesn't work that way. You have to come to practice. The third group of people that I see sitting here today are those who are in the exchange zone waiting. They've been marked as a part of the team. They've come to practice. They're putting in their time. And they're waiting. They're waiting on a baton to arrive. If that's you, I say wait. Be diligent. Take every opportunity you can as your teammates running around that curve, bringing that baton to you. Wait. Watch. Pay attention. Be diligent. If you turn your head for a second, you may miss that moment, that mark on the track, which tells you to take off running. You have to be vigilant to be prepared. When you're in that zone waiting, you need to be ready, on go at any moment in time. Don't get caught staring around at the stands, staring around, waiting on your chance to get to play. You be ready to play the moment that that baton gets to you, because you're going to have a very heavy responsibility. All the onus on initiating the exchange is on the guy carrying the baton. All the onus of completing the exchange and finishing the race is on you who are waiting in the exchange zone. You had the opportunity to make us winners, to make us losers. Don't get caught napping. Don't get caught standing around staring at the stands, enjoying the crowd. And lastly, I better take a good drink of water before this one. This is the part that I don't want to talk about. But I think the Lord's going to rattle the cage today, so we'll see. In our church, there are people here who have run miles and miles and miles with a baton. And the unfortunate truth is that maybe because they had to carry it for so long, maybe because they were so busy carrying the baton that they didn't plan for that moment when they would enter an exchange zone, maybe they got mad at their teammate because they said something dumb on the bus ride to the track meet. I don't know. But for one reason or another, they entered the exchange zone and they left the exchange zone like that. My greatest fear is that there are world-class athletes in our church today who have dropped the baton and who have left it on the track. You may have had a good reason. You may have been exhausted. You may have done everything that you felt like you could do. But it doesn't change the fact there's a baton laying on the ground. I had a lot of other things I wanted to steer this message, a lot of other directions I wanted to go today. But last night I couldn't get past that. I want you to think about the words. I want you to think about the words that that young man said. It was probably my fault, said Gay, the 2007 world champion. Some people say that when it hits the hand, you should have it. I'm a veteran. I've run all kinds of relays. I've never dropped a baton in my life. It's kind of upsetting. I can't believe it. I want you to think about what a young man who is one of the fastest men in the world, extremely talented, very gifted individual, who has probably 100 times finished the race. But for the rest of his life, even if he wins gold medals after that moment, he will always remember the moment that he had to leave a baton on the track. Now, what I can tell you is I have good news. We serve a God who is gracious and who is better than any Olympic steering committee. We serve a God who has the authority and the power to walk you back to that spot, to say, this is what you left, and put it back in your hand and allow you to finish the race. As my heart became stirred about the exchange zones, one fact, I just have a hard time getting past, is that exchange zones are defined on the track. Exchange zones do not move. It is the static portion of the race. The runners and the baton are the part that's moving. We all are running and carrying or watching, but what we have to understand is there is a defined moment when you're going to have a window of time to pass the torch. And just because you pass the torch in 1 week's race does not mean that you have coasted into retirement. Let me make that clear real fast. I know a lot of times we think the race signifies birth to death. But if you've ever been an athlete, you got to run more than one race in a season. And most athletes will run more than one season. So you got to finish every race. Okay? I'm going to lob that out there. Just because you got a baton out of your hand don't mean that you won't ever carry one again. It means you need to get ready to carry the next one because another one's coming. There's probably another race. In high school, we ran 2 and 3 track meets a week. Okay? Sidebar. We have to be prepared as a people, as ministers, as parts of this church, as functioning members of this body. We have to be diligent about preparing for that exchange. I'm going to ask you today, are you preparing? Are you looking? Are you investing? Are you planning for that moment? Because exchanges happen in practice. They don't happen on race day. My greatest fear for our church is that we have batons laying on the ground and that we're going to lay more on the ground. Worship team, will you guys come on and give me some music? As they're coming, I'm going to wrap this thing up. If you'd like to do some further study, I encourage you to read 2 Timothy. If you'll start out in 2 Timothy chapter 1, you go through about verse 14, you'll see a neat little pattern there for how those of us who are carrying batons get ready to pass batons. But the whole book of 2 Timothy is great for this. Today, what I'm going to ask you, and what I'm going to make a call for, is anyone. There's two kinds. I talked about four, but there's two kinds that are really heavy on my heart. One is those who are carrying batons. Are you prepared? Are you preparing? Are you investing? You can go ahead whenever you want to. Are you investing? Are you getting that next one ready? Are you going to be able to execute that? Or are you just running and enjoying the noise of the crowd? Are you doing your thing and you're carrying that baton the best you can, and you're fast, and you may have even gotten us from behind to ahead? But we can lose all that if you're not preparing for an exchange. And then what my heart's really heavy for today is those among us, young or old, who left a baton on the track. I want to make sure you understand how serious that one is. I want you to look hard. In Halloween in the decision room, I would tell people, take a hard look at yourself. And I'm going to say that here today. Take a hard look at yourself. I've had to. Is there a baton that you left laying on the track for one reason or another? I'm not going to question your reason. The facts are the facts. If you left one laying on the track, there's a baton of ministry that's not getting done. There are people who are waiting to see that baton arrive. And on the heels of that baton may be the good news of Jesus Christ. And it can't get there because we left it laying on the track. As a church that does a lot of really good stuff, looking back down the track, I never want to see that. I never want to see it, because what that signifies is that we're not getting it done. Sure, we can do great at a lot of things, but we're not getting it done. We're not finishing the race. We're not finishing the course. Because when that thing hits the track, the race is done. It's on pause. You can't move. You can't win with a baton laying on the track. And if you've left one laying on the track, you can't win. I don't care what else you do. You can't win that race with your baton laying on the track. I want everyone to stand for a minute. I told myself I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to, because I just feel like God would be upset with me if I didn't. I wasn't going to ask anybody to come up today, because I'm just going to be honest. If I dropped the baton in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, I think I'd want to go to the locker room, and I think I'd want to stay there until people forgot my name. If you've dropped a baton of ministry, I understand that you may not want to face that music today in front of people. But what I want to make sure you understand is that this place here is an altar where you meet the Lord. And if this morning you became aware that you left a baton on the track, or maybe you've known for years and you've been carrying the guilt, this place is a place where God can take you to the moment. He can put it back in your hand. And like He did Samson, He can give you the strength of your youth. Your age means nothing to Him. If you've got a baton to carry that you laid down, I'm inviting you now to come pick it up. This is your moment. This is your time. I'll pray with you, But more importantly, God's going to meet with you here. He's going to put it back in your hand. And I expect you to run like the wind out of this place when you're done.